Hello, welcome back to Spellbound. I'm BJ the Book Witch, and this is my March wrap up and giveaway. Alright, so for those of you stats nerds out there, and I'm one of them too, I read a total of 12 books last month. The page count was 4,389, averaging about 142 pages per day. I read 2 5-star, 1 4.5-star, 4 4-stars, 2 3.5-star, and 3 3-stars, which was an average rating of 3.9 stars per book. And that's pretty decent. So I did a crap ton of traveling throughout March, which really helped my page count. But whenever I travel, especially for work, the books that I read are usually lighter or easier. I can't really afford to get lost in a trilogy or in an intense thriller when my head's got to be in the game on a work trip, you know? So without further ado, here they are. The Winter Duke by Claire Eliza Bartlett. First of all, what a name. Second of all, this is a YA winter-themed fantasy. As the middle daughter to the Grand Duke of Kilma above, Akata has no shot at the throne and no interest. Truth be told, she intends to leave the kingdom and study alchemy. Tomorrow. But the night before her departure, her entire family is placed under a curse, and Akata alone must work to find a cure. And run the kingdom, and find a wife, and avoid war with any number of the neighboring kingdoms pressing in on the duchy. And thank God I asked Google how to pronounce that word before this review, or we'd both be spending an awful lot of time feeling awkward. Anyway, that's the plot. I gave it 3.5 stars, rounding down to 3 for Goodreads. So the setting of this book is super cool. Kilma above is an ice palace that sits on this massive chunk of ice that never thaws, and below the ice is Kilma below, which is a magical undersea kingdom of merpeople. So Bartlett crushed it with the backdrop for sure. But the entire book takes place within the same walls of the palace over the course of 7 days. So while there is a quick trip to Kilma below and an even quicker trip to the town outside the ice palace, most of the plot takes place within the same 3 rooms. The plot is politically driven, but that's communicated almost exclusively through dialogue, so there's not a lot of sneaking, spying, or active deception on behalf of our protagonist. There is a mystery to solve, but the clues aren't found organically from the protagonist's own curiosity. The clues are intentionally revealed to the protagonist from supporting characters who are actually driving the plot the whole time. So, with weak characters and a slow and unfortunately adventureless plot, this book feels more like an icy, atmospheric still life painting set in a polar fantasy kingdom. Wrath and Mercy by Jessica Rubinkowski. So this is the sequel to The Bright and the Pale, which is a polar YA fantasy. I described this book as if Frozen and Balto had a book baby, and similar to The Winter Duke, the setting of this book is incredible. Unfortunately, the plot and the character development is just not there for me. So I did DNF this book. I made it about 30% of the way through, but all of the same problems from the first book were still here in the sequel too. The book is written in summary. The motivations of the main character are unclear even to herself, and the love interest is this very weird simp, and neither one of them seem to have an issue with the fact that they repeat their own conversations. I found the setting and premise of this book to be even more promising than The Winter Duke, but there just isn't enough depth in the adventure for me. This book reads very, very young YA, possibly even middle grade. I did give it 3 stars. Just because I DNF'd it doesn't mean that I don't think that others wouldn't enjoy it. The Intimacy Experiment by Rosie Danan. This is a contemporary rom-com and set in the same world as The Roommate. I would not call it a sequel because we're following 2 different characters, but the events of this book do take place after the events of The Roommate, which I also enjoyed and rated 4 stars. This one follows Naomi, a former porn star. She is the co-CEO of an inclusive, sex-positive education site and, for all intents and purposes, a woman-focused porn site. She is approached by a local rabbi, Ethan, who is new to his synagogue. Hoping to appeal to a younger audience and drive attendance, he asks to partner with Naomi to create a 6-week course on modern intimacy. This book also gets 4 stars from me. As far as contemporary rom-coms go, Rosie Danan really nails all of those tropes and fun elements and sexual tension that you're looking for. But what I love most about her books is how delightfully sex positive and charming they are, while still being really down to earth. They are accessible. Danan creates characters that you can relate to on multiple levels. And while The Roommate was much more focused on the exploration of sexual expression from a personal level, this book really explores the intersection between faith, intimacy, identity, and community. And I think that she wove Judaism and religion into this book in a way that was really well done and really interesting to read. Unteachable by Leah Raeder. This one is a contemporary romance, decidedly not a rom-com. Maze, maybe pronounced Maisie, unclear, has just turned 18 when she meets a handsome stranger at a carnival. After a magical night together, Maisie ditches him and tries all summer to forget him. But when she walks into her film class her senior year, she realizes that the charming man that she may have already fallen for is in fact her new instructor. This one got 3 stars from me. What this book does exceptionally well is describe the feelings and process of falling in love, especially with the added excitement and complications of falling in love with an older man. Oh yeah, this is an age gap romance. I find that I keep coming back to these. Something to consider. But this book tried to move in too many different directions. What I mean by that is that I'm not sure that the author had decided how they feel or how we should feel about the love interest until about the end of the book. But by then it was kind of too late. We had ended on a path and a message that either didn't seem totally believable or it was one that not a lot of people would want to root for. So that was intentionally vague, and that's because I don't want to spoil anything for you. But if you want the dirty details, then stick around because we are moving into spoiler territory. And don't worry, the red spoiler balloon will appear as soon as I say something incriminating. So the thing about age gap romances is that you've got to know going in whether or not the age gap is going to be part of the romance or like just a happy accident. My husband and I are still working on figuring this one out. But for like a romance novel, you've got to know it. Just like for a queer romance novel, you need to know going in whether or not the characters are aware that they're queer, whether or not they're out, or whether they're still in the process of discovering. Because that discovery is going to be part of that process of coming out, and that's going to be part of the tension of the book. So in the same way with an age gap, you need to know if the age difference itself is going to be the source of tension, or really just the source of all of their differences. So an example here of the latter would be Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. That's an age gap. But the age difference between the two main characters is not really insurmountable. It's not even really that overtly taboo. Because the main source of conflict for these two characters is that the love interest is in fact her ex's dad. So the concerns have merit. But the source of tension in this book is threefold: the age difference, the power dynamic, and whether or not he intentionally sought her out because of her age, which begins to move into potentially predatory territory. And the thing about this book is that it explores all three. And in every single one of these nuanced explorations, the love interest doesn't start to look too good. The fatal flaw where this book moved from a pretty melodramatic 4-star all the way down an entire star was when it came out that this teacher had actually already previously had an affair with a different student, and that student was underage. And then, in his weird defense of the affair, he starts blaming the victim and talking about how she was so obsessed with him, and also I think she got pregnant and then they terminated the pregnancy, and I don't know, but when I read it, I was like, oh, okay, we've discovered who he is. Because you've got to understand, so far the quest for the protagonist has been to ask and discover, am I the statistic or am I the exception? And with that discovery turned gross confession, we have our answer. But then it was like the author changed their mind, and that this revelation was actually just the final turning point of the plot and the final obstacle where the love interest could actually prove her exceptionness. But even if that's the case, gross? He showed his true colors already, and even if his feelings for the protagonist were somehow his own exception, that doesn't make her an inherent exception by any means, because she is, by their own account, the second student in what is now a gross pattern, and she is a statistic, even if she herself was not a victim of any kind. So I would honestly love to talk with someone about this book, as I obviously have thoughts on the matter of age gaps. But really, this book was startling in its beauty and accuracy and its descriptions of falling in love, but it did fall short in everything else. So I don't know, you tell me what you think. The Girl in the Tower by Katherine Arden. This is the second book in the Winter Night trilogy and the sequel to The Bear and the Nightingale, an incredible fantasy. And my review of The Bear and the Nightingale is right here. This book follows Vasya as she travels to Moscow and discovers a plot to overthrow the Grand Prince. 5 stars. Once again, Arden's writing is transcendent. Almost the entirety of the plot takes place within the walls of Moscow, which at times can feel really constricting, but ultimately that does serve the plot and support our protagonist, as that is a main source of tension for her as well. The plot unfolds much more rapidly than the first book, leading to an epic and active climax. I love this series, and I love Arden's writing. I know it may not seem like it because I basically just wrote a whole dissertation on that dumb age gap romance over there, but The Bear and the Nightingale is a damn near perfect book, and I can't really comment on any of the aspects of its sequel in either form or content without really giving away any plot elements. So just read it. The Winter of the Witch by Katherine Arden. This is the third book of the Winter Night trilogy and the sequel to The Girl in the Tower. This epic conclusion forces Vasya to discover and then choose her own fate. This book and the entire trilogy is a love letter to Russia and the peace that this nation saw for centuries between paganism and Christianity. It's a beautiful trilogy with a beautiful unfolding narrative and soul. But I will say that this third book was my least favorite of the 3, and that's because with its very fast-paced action journeying plans and plot, that I think that we lost some of that really slow fireside fairy tale story atmosphere and tone that was really captured well in the first and second book. Wild, The Terrain of Kindle Unlimited. This book is about a woman, I didn't write her name down, don't remember, who marries a knight, and then the day after their marriage, he's sent off to war. 3 years later, he returns, victorious and very prestigious, and they now have to learn how to relate to each other since she has spent 3 years building a life for herself outside of him. I read this book somewhere between Jackson, Mississippi, Nashville, Tennessee, and Key West, Florida, and I don't remember a damn thing about it, but I did give it 3 stars, so do with that what you will. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. So this one has been talked about a lot, so I won't spend too much time on this surrealist fantasy. But this book is about Piranesi, who lives in an expansive museum-like house. He spends his days cataloging hallways and information as he aids his friend the other in searching for a great and secret knowledge. Until one day, Piranesi discovers someone else in the house, someone who may pose a great threat to Piranesi. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This is a pretty solid labyrinthian allegory for mental health and meditation. It's important, I think, to know that going in, though, because trying to read this book in any literal sense will quickly become tiresome, and I would argue that it may still be, regardless. This short novel had all of the textbook components of a novella, a singular plotline, limited character development, and lack of any subplot. So, in my opinion, the allegorical components of this book would have been better served if conveyed through the medium of a novella. As it is, you get lost in this book, and not in a good way. Regardless, it's very clear what this author is trying to do and succeeds in doing. Drawing inspiration from the short story The Library of Babel, this commentary on man's search for truth is handled with care and imagination. The River Has Teeth by Erica Waters. This is a monster-based fiction novel with fantastical elements, but I struggle to label this one as a fantasy. So Della's family has been on the Bend, which is this stretch of land that's really reminiscent of Appalachia, for centuries. and her family has been connected to the Ben's magic for generations. But recently, this magic has started to go kind of wrong, and the spells and tinctures that Della and her father cook up for some of the women in nearby towns starts to have some unforeseen consequences. And Della and her father are convinced that this wrongness in the Bend is the source of this great tragedy surrounding Della's mother. And when women start to go missing in these woods and then turn up dead, bodies ravaged beyond recognition, she's convinced that her mother, a river monster, is to blame. But when a victim's sister starts to begin her own investigation, both girls stumble into a mystery far more sinister than either one of them could have imagined. This book is 4 full stars of some of the most satisfying violence you'll ever read. Personally, I believe that vengeance is just as much of a virtue as forgiveness, and in fact I did a whole video on it right here about revenge in books. So this book fed my soul. A female-forward story of anger, vengeance, and gentle acceptance. This book is intense. My favorite thing about this book is the magic system of the Bend. It's both autonomous and that the land itself is and always did have its own magical properties, but it's also uniquely connected to a prophecy involving Della's great-grandmother, who was a victim of a witch hunt. This classic story of victimization and then exacting revenge is what makes the magic system and this story so accessible. A story about the helplessness that women feel far too often, this book will hit you where it hurts and then show you how it feels to reclaim your power. It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This is a contemporary rom-com that I believe was inspired by the character of Alexis from Schitt's Creek. After a wild night of partying leaves her in jail, Piper is cut off from her stepfather's film industry fortune. She's sent to a small fishing town near Seattle called Westport, where her father passed away, to reconnect with her roots and learn to make her own way. There she falls in love with the town, her history, and a grumpy sea captain. 4 stars. While this predictable rom-com felt way more low stakes than others that are out there, Bailey's strength comes in her funny dialogue and her descriptions of the town itself. This book is written so cinematically that you'll want to move to Westport yourself. Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is a contemporary rom-com and the sequel to It Happened One Summer. This book follows Hannah, Piper's little sister. In the first book, Hannah travels with Piper to Westport and stays with her for a few months to help her get settled. There, she meets the love interest's best friend Fox, and the two of them form a friendship. Hannah works as a PA on an indie film, with dreams of becoming a music coordinator. In a move to establish herself on set, Hannah suggests they change locations of the film from LA to Westport. This change of scenery allows Hannah to grow in her own confidence as well as reconnect with a long-distance friend that she's never been able to forget. So this book has all the same atmospheric charm from the first book, but this one chases different tropes and relies on both characters really discovering themselves. It's a much more feelings-oriented book, and there's a lot of it's not you, it's me angst, which to me really gets old. So I gave this one 3.5 stars, but rounded up for Goodreads. Okay, so before I introduce this next book, I have to tell you how I came upon it. I have to. My reputation as a discerning and borderline pretentious reader is at stake. So I spent a good amount of last year and a little of this year reading books that were recommended by booktubers that I enjoy watching. But the thing is, just because I enjoy watching these booktubers doesn't mean that we necessarily have the same taste in books. And then I discovered Ally Enchanted. Not only is Ally Enchanted just a captivating, ethereal being, but she's funny, which is a plus when you're watching 15 or 20-minute videos of strangers on the internet talking about books that you have not read. But if I'm being honest, what sealed the deal is that the end of her videos end with The Heroic Weather Conditions of the Universe by Alexander Desplat, which is from the soundtrack of Wes Anderson's Moonrise Kingdom. Very funny anecdote that I just remember happened to me. I used to date this girl, and she was a bass player, which meant she was a music snob. I could be generalizing, but that's not important. What is important is that we were going to this record store that is well known, apparently, by music people. I am not music people, perhaps that's why things didn't work out, but we were going to meet up with some friends of hers, part ways, and she was going to go with her friends to a Rise Against concert that was going to start later that night downtown. Anyway, we're at Park Ave CDs. I pick out a CD. It's the soundtrack to Moonrise Kingdom, which had just come out. She scoffs at me, literally scoffs, for entering a music store and leaving with a soundtrack. But as I said, I'm not a music person, I am a movie person. I was in film school at the time. Anyway, I take my CD to the front and the guy behind the counter asks if I want him to sign it. I was like, no. But I said it real weird and just like that because like what kind of store staff offers to sign the merchandise? Well, my girlfriend was mortified because I had just rudely dissed the lead singer of Rise Against. Apparently, the whole point of meeting at Park Ave CDs was because the band was there, signing autographs and CDs before the show. Didn't know that. So yeah, love Alexander Desplat, love that song, geeked about it in Allie's comments, and she was like, yep, for sure, Desplat's the bomb, and that is how I officially became an Allie Enchanted fangirl. So then, when Allie did a video on romances, I noticed that we had a lot of really good crossover. Not only did she like a lot of the same romance novels that I like, but she liked them for the same reasons, which was validating. So when she held up this cover of this mass market paperback, I was like, nope, see ya, there it goes, your credibility, it's gone. But she was like, look, do not judge this book by its cover. It is nothing like what it looks like. It is, and I thought she was gonna say beautiful, sweeping, or dramatic, or something. But she said, extremely funny. And I was like, what? And I realized that there may be more to this book than everything that unfortunately meets the eye. And the book is When a Scot Ties the Knot by Tessa Dare. And Allie was absolutely right. This book surprised the living daylights out of me. It is nothing like what it looks like on this absolutely ridiculous cover. This book is about Maddie Gracechurch, who is about to have to participate in a season of courtship in high society, so very Bridgerton. But she's not interested in any of that. All she wants to do is illustrate insects for encyclopedias. So to avoid all of this social interaction, she invents a lover, a Scotsman who is conveniently away at war. She's all, sorry parents, but this Captain Mackenzie and I are very involved, betrothed in fact, and pity about the war, but I won't be needing to attend any of those balls. And so she writes all of this to Captain Mackenzie. She's like, hey, here's what I'm doing. I know you're not real, but here's some stuff about me anyway. And she keeps this up for 10 years. And in the meantime, her family gifts her this castle in Scotland and a whole lot of land that is going to belong to her and her husband once he returns from the war. And so she lives out in this castle with her weirdo eccentric aunt. But over time, you know, she has these nieces and nephews, and she starts to feel that this prank that she pulled in order to get her out of the season and establish the life that she wanted has become more of a lie and a deception, and so she needs to end it. So she decides to kill him off. She writes a final letter to Captain Mackenzie and is like, sorry bro, but I've got to kill you. And that's that. And so she lives happily in mourning in her castle. Then one day a stranger shows up on her doorstep, the real Captain Mackenzie and receiver of every single one of her letters. He shows up and says, hey lady, what's good? Sounds like we're betrothed and sounds like this is my castle too. Y'all, I almost gave this book 5 stars. If it hadn't been for the climax, which no way I'm going to tell you about, you have to read it for yourself, it would have been. This book was a laugh out loud funny. Brett asked me multiple times what had me cackling while I was reading next to him. And the thing about this book is that it was so lighthearted and had moments of absurdity without being a self-aware parody. Had it been self-aware, it would have been tiresome. It would have been campy. But it wasn't. It was just earnest enough in its own silliness and absurdity without it reaching too far. But it made the book charming and funny and make you want to keep reading. This ridiculously titled book is the definition of a good time. Okay, so those are my March books. What do you think? Have you read any of these books? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you also love Alexander Desplat? You gotta let me know, because now it is time for my favorite part of the month, and that is my monthly giveaway. This month, I'm giving away Star Daughter by Shweta Thekrar. This is a beautifully written debut YA fantasy that incorporates a lot of Hindu mythology. It's been a minute since I've read this one, and I want to do this book justice because it is very good, so I'm going to read the Goodreads description. If the night sky holds many secrets, it holds Chital Mystery's secret the closest. A secret that explains why her hair is a silver of starlight, or why some nights the stars call Sheetal by name. Stars like her mother, who returned to her place in the constellation Pushya years ago. Since that day, Sheetal has been forced to hide. But as her 17th birthday draws near, the pull from the sky is growing stronger. So strong that Sheetal loses control and a flare of starfire burns her father, an injury only a full star's blood can heal. Sheetal has no choice but to answer the star song and descend to the sky, but her celestial family has summoned her for a reason, to act as their human champion in a competition to decide the next ruling house of heavens. Desperate to save her father, Sheetal agrees, but nothing could have prepared Sheetal to face the star's dark history, or the forces that are working to shut the gate between the realms for good. I really enjoyed reading this book and learning about celestial Hindu mythology. So I really hope that you like this book too, and we can gush about it together, because once again, these giveaways are just for me to connect with you and bond over some really great books that I love. The giveaway itself will be over on Instagram, and all you have to do to enter the giveaway is just like and comment on the post that says giveaway. That's it. You don't have to be following me. If you did, that would be pretty neat, but it's not a requirement. Live your life. So just like and comment. And for this giveaway, comment the most ridiculous titled romance novel that you've ever seen, whether you've read it or not. Mine would have to be The Bull Rider's Christmas Baby, which my brother and I saw in a supermarket once many years ago. And I have since spent so much time thinking of fake plots to that book in my head that it's hysterical. So yeah, like I said, to enter into this giveaway, like and comment on my post with a ridiculous romance title. Anyway, the giveaway will be up for 1 week, and then I will use my random name picker app to choose a winner. Oh, and also make sure that if you're in private, that you're checking your messages within the week so that I can reach out to you and ask for your address. All right, that's it for me. What do you think about these books? Let me know down below. And then if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you loved it, hit subscribe. Take care, and as always, happy reading!